My parents always said they'd split their estate 50-50ths between me and my brother. Then Mom told me flat out, "You'll get nothing. He gives us grandkids, you give us headaches." When I bought my own house, she mocked it as ugly compared to the palace we'll leave your brother. What she didn't know is Grandpa left everything to me directly: house, land, and savings, bypassing them entirely. When they found out, Dad screamed, "This isn't fair. We raised you." I said, "No, you raised him. I raised myself. They're still begging me to do the right thing." My parents had this golden rule they repeated like gospel growing up: we treat both kids the same. Everything is equal, 50-50. They said it in front of neighbors, friends, extended family. Even in those holiday letters they'd mail out bragging about us. To anyone outside, we looked like the picture-perfect family. But behind closed doors, it was obvious that I was the afterthought. I was the kid who never seemed to measure up. My brother was the golden boy, married young, had kids right away, always giving them grandparent energy to gush about at family dinners. I was the late bloomer, the one who moved out at 20, took a while to figure out my career path, didn't rush into marriage or kids. Mom used to say it in this cutting way that felt half joke, half truth: "Your brother gave us grandkids. You just give us headaches." She said it at Thanksgiving one year in front of everyone, and everyone laughed except me. I just smiled tightly and swallowed it down like I always did. They'd go to every soccer game of his kids, every recital, every doctor's appointment, and act like it was the most noble thing in the world. Meanwhile, if I invited them to something important in my life, like when I got promoted at work or closed on my first house, they'd either brush it off or show up just to make digs. When I bought my place, a small but cozy 3-bedroom I'd been saving for years to afford, Mom looked around and said, "Well, it's not exactly the palace your brother's kids will inherit, but I guess it's fine for someone like you, someone like me." That phrase stuck. I went to bed that night staring at the ceiling, wondering how it was possible to feel so much pride in myself and so much shame in the same breath. They always dangled the estate over our heads like some kind of carrot. Dad would say, "We worked hard for this house, this land. Someday, it'll be yours and your brother's, 50/50. Like it was their legacy, their big promise of equality. The one thing I thought I could count on. So when Mom dropped the bomb one day, flat out saying, "You'll get nothing. We're leaving it all to your brother. He gives us grandkids. You give us stress." It was like a punch to the gut I'd been preparing for my whole life without realizing it. She said it so casually, like she wasn't rewriting decades of promises in one sentence. I remember staring at her across the kitchen island, the way she sipped her coffee like we were talking about the weather. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her how unfair it was, how I'd been working nonstop since I was 16, how I'd built my life with no safety net from them, how my brother had been bailed out of every mistake he made: loans, bad investments, even a DUI that my parents quietly paid a lawyer to make go away. Instead, I just said, "Okay," and left. Because deep down, I knew arguing with her was useless. They had already decided who mattered and who didn't. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Grandpa, her own father, had seen everything over the years. He'd been the quiet observer at family gatherings, the one who noticed who was mocked and who was ignored. He'd lived through Mom's digs at me, seen Dad's blind favoritism, and he never said much. But apparently, he remembered it all. When he passed, his lawyer called me in. I braced myself, expecting some small token, maybe a little money, maybe some old keepsake. Instead, I walked out of that office holding the deed to his house, the land it sat on, and a sizable savings account he'd tucked away. It bypassed my parents entirely. Every single thing went directly to me. I sat in my car afterward, just staring at the paperwork, numb. Part of me wanted to cry out of relief, another part wanted to laugh, and another part wanted to scream because this validation hadn't come from the people who were supposed to love me most. It had come from the one person who'd seen me without needing me to prove my worth. I didn't tell anyone right away. I just sat with it. I fixed up Grandpa's house, spent weekends painting walls, redoing the garden, making it feel like home. It was the first time in my life I felt like something was mine, truly mine, without strings attached. But secrets don't stay secrets in families. Word got out. Dad was the first to explode. He stormed into my house one evening, red-faced and shaking. "This isn't fair," he shouted. "We raised you. You owe us. That should have come to us first. then been split fairly. I remember standing there in my own living room, papers in a drawer, realizing the irony. The same man who told me I'd get nothing was now screaming about fairness. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "No, you raised him. I raised myself." That shut him up. For a second, at least. Now they're begging me to do the right thing, to honor the family. They keep saying it's not about the money, it's about respect. But respect is something you earn, not something you demand after years of neglect. And for the first time in my life, I'm the one holding the power. After Dad's outburst in my living room, I thought maybe he'd blow off steam and let it go. But nope. My phone started blowing up the next morning. Missed calls from Mom, texts from Dad, voicemails from my brother. All of them had the same vibe: guilt-tripping, manipulative, and dripping with entitlement. Mom's first text: "Honey, we know you're confused right now, but you need to understand, this inheritance wasn't meant to drive a wedge between family. We should sit down and discuss how to distribute it properly." Properly. As in, hand it over. Then Dad: "You can't just keep all of this. Your brother has kids to support. You don't. It's selfish to hold on to land that could help them build a future." And the kicker? My brother left a voicemail saying, "Hey, man, look, you don't even like country living. Why don't you just sell Grandpa's place to me cheap? That way, it stays in the family. I'll give you a fair price. We can call it even." Fair price. He offered me less than what the land was worth when I checked Zillow a month earlier. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I turned off my phone and drove to Grandpa's place. It was quiet, tucked away in a part of town where the houses weren't flashy but solid, built by people who cared more about roots than appearances. I walked through the backyard, past the garden I'd been reviving, and I just sat there with a beer, thinking, this is the family they didn't know how to value. See, the thing is, I wasn't just sitting on assets. I was building something. I had already started renting out part of the land to a local farmer. The house. I was fixing up the basement to rent as an apartment. I was making Grandpa's legacy work for me, because I knew how to survive without handouts. But my parents? They only saw dollar signs slipping through their fingers. A week later, they showed up again, this time together. Mom brought a casserole like it was supposed to soften me up. Dad wore his serious face, the one he used when he thought he was about to negotiate a big win. "We just want to talk," Mom said, setting the dish on my counter like we were back in some sitcom. I crossed my arms. "Talk about what?" Dad cleared his throat. "About what's fair. About how this situation looks to the rest of the family. Right now, it looks like you're hoarding what should be shared." I laughed, sharp and bitter. "Shared? Like when you shared my college fund with my brother. Or when you shared birthdays by skipping mine to make his special. Or when Mom shared her wisdom by telling me I'd get nothing. That kind of fair." Mom's face went pale. Dad clenched his jaw. "That was different," he said. "We made sacrifices for him because he had responsibilities. You didn't." "Exactly," I snapped. "I had to make sacrifices for myself because you never made any for me. And now you want me to bail you out? Not happening." That was the moment I saw it. The flicker in their eyes, the realization that I wasn't bluffing, that they couldn't guilt me back into line. Mom started crying. Real tears this time, not her usual crocodile performance. "We're family," she whispered. "You can't just cut us out." But I could, and I did. After they left, I sat down with Grandpa's lawyer. We set up trusts, long-term investments, safety nets. Not for them, but for me and whatever family I chose to build in the future. I wasn't going to repeat their mistakes. Of course, word spread fast. My brother stopped calling me bro and started calling me selfish to anyone who would listen. Cousins reached out with half-hearted, just checking in texts that all led to some version of, "So, what are you planning to do with the inheritance?" It was like vultures circling. The same people who had ignored me for years now suddenly remembered I existed. The worst part? I caught myself almost buying into their narrative once or twice. Late at night, staring at my ceiling, I'd think, maybe I should share. Maybe I am being harsh. But then I'd remember every slammed door, every insult disguised as a joke, every time I was told I wasn't enough, and the doubt would evaporate. One night, Mom left me a voicemail after what must have been a few glasses of wine. Her voice cracked as she said, "We just don't understand why you hate us so much. All we did was try to raise you right. Your brother gave us everything we asked for. You only ever gave us trouble. But we still love you." I replayed that message 3 times. Not once did she say she was sorry. Not once did she acknowledge the years of favoritism. Love without accountability isn't love. It's control. So I did the only thing that felt right. I blocked them. Phones, emails, social media, all of it. For the first time in my life, I had peace. But peace doesn't last long in my family. 2 months later, I got a letter in the mail. Not from them directly, but from a lawyer. They were trying to contest Grandpa's will. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about money. This was about power. They couldn't stand that I had any. And if they wanted to fight, well, I'd been preparing for one my whole life. The envelope with the lawyer's letter sat on my counter for a full day before I opened it. I already knew what it said. My parents and my brother were trying to contest Grandpa's will. They were arguing that Grandpa wasn't of sound mind when he signed everything over to me, that he'd been pressured or confused. Confused. That word stung, because if there was one thing Grandpa never was, it was confused. He was sharp until the day he died. He could tell you the price of corn in 1974, the score of the Cubs game from a random Tuesday in 1989, and exactly where he'd left his wrench in the garage. The idea that he was too confused to decide who got his property? Insulting. But I wasn't naive. I knew this wasn't about Grandpa's mental state. It was about them not being able to stomach the fact that they'd been cut out. They thought they were entitled. So I called the lawyer who had handled Grandpa's will. He chuckled when I read the letter out loud. "Don't worry," he said. "Your parents don't have a case. Your grandfather was meticulous. He did this deliberately. He wanted you to have everything. He left me notes." Notes. Plural. Grandpa had gone so far as to document his reasons. "Your parents showed me their true colors years ago," one note said. "You're the only one who visits. You're the only one who works. This land would rot in their hands. It will grow in yours." Reading that, I cried. I hadn't cried since the funeral. For once, I felt like someone had seen me, really seen me, and valued what I brought to the table. When the court date came, my parents and my brother walked in like they were the victims of some great injustice. Mom wore black like it was a funeral. Dad kept glaring at me like I'd committed some unforgivable crime. My brother sat back with his arms crossed, smug, like this was already won. The judge asked for the lawyer's documentation, and that was the end of it. Grandpa's notes, his signed will, the witnesses, it was airtight. Their claim fell apart in under an hour. But what I remember most wasn't the victory. It was the way my parents looked at me afterward. Not like their child. Not like someone they'd raised. But like the enemy. On the way out, Mom leaned in close and whispered, "You'll regret this. Blood is blood. You can't erase us." I didn't say a word. I just walked out. After that, the silence was louder than the calls had ever been. Weeks went by. No voicemails. No texts. No surprise visits. For the first time in my life, my parents weren't hovering. Not to scold me. Not to guilt me. Not to compare me to my brother. But silence has a way of breeding its own kind of anxiety. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. And it did. It was a Saturday morning when I got a knock at my door. I opened it to find my brother on the porch. He looked rough, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, smelling like stale beer. "Can we talk?" he asked. Against my better judgment, I let him in. He sat at the kitchen table, hunched over like a kid who'd been sent to the principal's office. "I didn't think they'd take it this far," he admitted. "I just wanted, I don't know. I thought maybe if I pushed, you'd split it. I didn't think they'd drag it to court." I stared at him. "You lied. You told them I pressured Grandpa." He didn't deny it, just rubbed his face with his hands. "Yeah, I messed up. But you don't get it. They've always expected me to be the golden child. To deliver. And I keep screwing up. The business I tried to start? Gone. The house they helped me buy? Foreclosed. The loans? Stacked sky high. They need me to look like I've got it together, but I don't. I'm drowning." For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered every time he'd stood by while they tore me down. Every time he'd benefited while I scraped by. Every time he'd laughed when I got left behind. "You made your choices," I said flatly. "And now you're living with them." His eyes flashed with anger. "So that's it. You're just gonna sit here on Grandpa's land, act like you're better than everyone, and let the family fall apart." I leaned back in my chair. "No, I'm going to sit here on Grandpa's land and build something for myself. Something real. You and Mom and Dad can decide if you want to keep tearing each other apart. That's not my problem anymore." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. But families like mine don't just fade quietly into the background. A few days later, I got an invitation in the mail, a family reunion, hosted by my parents. The theme was celebrating legacy. It was like they couldn't help themselves. I stared at that invitation for a long time. Part of me wanted to rip it up. Another part of me thought, maybe this was it. Maybe this was the stage they were building, and maybe it was time I stepped onto it. Because they thought legacy meant property and appearances. But Grandpa had left me something bigger than land. He'd left me the power to finally stand up and say, I'm not the disgrace. I'm the proof you were wrong. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to show them. The family reunion wasn't supposed to get under my skin. I told myself it was just another one of their petty shows. But the second I saw that invitation sitting on my counter, my chest tightened. Celebrating legacy. The audacity. I almost didn't go. Honestly, I wanted to throw it straight in the trash. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this was exactly what they'd always counted on. Me staying quiet, staying out of sight, letting them control the narrative. Grandpa didn't raise me to cower, and after everything they put me through, I wasn't about to hand them the stage. So I went. The reunion was at the community hall, the same place they'd thrown every big event since I was a kid. As soon as I pulled into the parking lot, I saw the giant banner strung across the entrance, "The Family Legacy Lives On." Below it were blown-up photos of my brother, his wife, and their kids, smiling, perfect, airbrushed. Not a single picture of me, not even one of Grandpa. Inside, it was like stepping into a propaganda campaign. Tables lined with scrapbooks, collages, and posters all about my brother's achievements. A slideshow running on loop of his so-called milestones, his wedding, his first house that my parents helped him buy, his kids' birthdays. It felt less like a family reunion and more like a coronation. I was invisible. People gave me side glances when I walked in, like I was a party crasher. My aunt, Mom's sister, actually said, "Oh, I didn't know you'd be here." Like I wasn't even supposed to show my face. My parents were at the center table, beaming like royalty. Mom wore this smug little smile when she saw me. Dad didn't even say hello. My brother clapped me on the shoulder with fake warmth. "Glad you could make it," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. For a while, I just observed. I walked around, saw the displays, listened to the conversations. Everyone was talking about how proud they were of my brother, how he was carrying the family name. Not a single mention of my med school acceptance, my jobs, the house I bought with my own sweat. None of it existed in their curated version of reality. I felt that old burn in my chest, the one I used to feel as a kid when I got left out, when I was told I wasn't enough. But instead of swallowing it down like before, I pulled out the USB drive in my pocket. Grandpa's lawyer had given me scanned copies of his notes, his letters, even a video he'd recorded a few months before he passed. I debated whether to bring it. In that moment, I knew I had. So when they dimmed the lights for yet another slideshow of my brother's life, I walked up to the booth and handed the tech guy my drive. "Play this," I said. The screen flickered. At first, it was pictures, but not of my brother. They were of me and Grandpa, fixing fences together, sitting on the porch drinking lemonade, him teaching me how to change the oil in his truck. Then came the scans of his letters. His handwriting filled the screen. "I leave everything to my granddaughter because she has the strength to carry it. She stood by me when no one else did. She works for everything she has, and she will not squander it." The room went dead silent. I scanned the crowd. Confusion, whispers, side eyes. My parents looked like they'd swallowed glass. My brother's jaw clenched so hard I thought he'd crack a tooth. And then the video started. Grandpa's voice filled the hall. He was sitting in his old recliner, wearing his work shirt, speaking straight into the camera. "If you're watching this, I'm gone. I want to be clear. My land, my house, my savings, they go to her. Not to my son, not to my daughter, not to anyone else. She earned it. She's the only one who showed up. You may not like it, but it's my decision. My legacy is hers." People gasped. One cousin muttered, "Damn." I didn't say a word. I just stood there while the screen faded to black. My mom was the first to break. She stood up, her voice shrill. "This is manipulation." He was old. He didn't know what he was saying. But nobody looked convinced. The notes, the video, it was ironclad. And more than that, it was honest. Raw. You could hear the conviction in Grandpa's voice. My dad pointed a finger at me. "You set this up. You turned him against us." I finally spoke. Calm, steady. "No, you did that yourselves." He just saw it. The room shifted. I could feel it. People who'd always believed the golden child narrative now seeing cracks in it. Seeing me not as the outsider, but as the one who'd been there all along. My brother stormed out, dragging his wife and kids behind him. My parents followed, red-faced, refusing to meet my eyes. And me? I stayed. I talked to relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years. A few of them came up quietly, saying things like, "I didn't know," or "I'm sorry." I didn't need their apologies, but hearing them was like balm on an old wound. By the time I left, the banner outside had lost its power. The family legacy lives on. Yeah, just not the way they thought. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. After the reunion fallout, I thought maybe my parents would leave me alone for a while. That lasted all of 3 days. Mom called first. I didn't answer. Then came the texts, paragraphs about how families should stick together, how your grandfather didn't understand the full picture, and my favorite, "You're letting greed poison you." Greed. From the same people who drained my college fund to keep my brother out of jail. From the same people who called my house ugly while bragging about the palace they'd leave him. From the same people who'd erased me from every narrative they told. I ignored it. Then Dad showed up at my house. I came back from work one evening to find him sitting on my front steps, looking older than I'd ever seen him. He had that stiff, pride-swallowed demeanor he always put on when he was about to ask for something. "Can we talk?" he said. Against my better judgment, I let him inside. He walked around my living room like he was inspecting it, like he couldn't quite believe I'd built something without their help. Finally, he sat down and got to the point. "Look," he said, "we've had our differences. But you've got to understand how unfair this is. That land, that money, it should have gone to all of us. To the family." "Funny," I said. "That's not what Grandpa thought." His jaw tightened. He was old. He wasn't thinking straight. "No," I said. "He was the only one thinking clearly. He saw what you refused to see." Dad tried again. "Your brother has kids. He needs stability. You don't even." I cut him off. "Stop. Just stop. You think I don't know what you're doing? You're not here for some noble family cause. You're here because your golden boy is drowning, and you're hoping I'll bail him out." Again, the silence between us stretched. Then he said the thing that made my blood boil. "You owe us." I laughed, sharp and humorless. "Owe you? For what? For telling me I'd never amount to anything? For making me raise myself while you poured everything into him? For calling my house ugly, my life pathetic, my existence a headache? What exactly do I owe you for?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me with that same disappointed look he'd worn my whole life. Except this time, it didn't land. For once, I wasn't the kid desperate for approval. I was the adult who finally saw through the game. I stood up. "You should leave." He muttered something about me being ungrateful as he walked out, slamming the door behind him. That was the last time either of my parents set foot in my house. Weeks passed. Word spread through the family about the will, about the reunion, about the video. Some relatives sided with my parents, calling me cruel or selfish. Others quietly reached out, telling me they'd always suspected something was off. But my parents? They doubled down. Facebook posts about how money divides families, passive-aggressive jabs about kids forgetting who raised them. Mom even mailed me a handwritten letter, 5 pages of guilt-tripping, ending with, "Do the right thing and share. Family is all we have." I didn't respond. Then came the kicker. My brother called. He didn't even bother with pleasantries. "You've ruined everything," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "That land should have been mine. You know Dad always promised." "Yeah," I said. "Promised you with my money." "You don't even have kids," he snapped. "What do you need it for?" "Funny," I said. "Grandpa didn't seem to think my worth depended on kids. He valued me for me." Imagine that. There was a long pause. Then he spat. "You'll regret this. Family always comes around in the end." Click. That was months ago. Since then, I've had peace for the first time in my life. I wake up in my house, on my land, knowing I earned it, and that the one person who ever truly saw me trusted me with his legacy. Sometimes I walk the property line just to breathe it in. I think about Grandpa, about all the afternoons we spent fixing fences or sitting in silence on the porch. I think about how he looked at me like I was enough, even when no one else did. And sometimes I think about my parents. I imagine them sitting in their house, bitter and empty, waiting for a call that isn't coming, wondering how the narrative slipped out of their control. They thought they could erase me, replace me, mock me into silence. But in the end, the truth came out. Not because I fought for their scraps, but because I stopped needing their validation. When people ask me now about my family, I tell them the truth. My parents raised my brother. I raised myself. And I think I turned out better for it. The rest? That's just noise.